Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and we got a great one for you today. Today, we're going to hear a couple stories from Jim Huntsman. If you aren't familiar with Jim, you need to be. He's the host of the Western Huntsman Podcast. It's amazing. It's one of my personal favorites. I won't go too in-depth here because he's going to in the episode a little bit, but you guys are in for a treat. Today, he tells us two stories. The first one of an injury that he got when he was younger in his first whitetail deer. It's disgusting, and I hope you enjoy it because it's hilarious. So I'm going to stop there. I don't want to ruin any details. Let's go ahead and let Jim tell you his stories. All right, Jim, welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. How you doing, sir?
Hey, man, I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I haven't recorded a podcast in a few weeks. And you're the first one to jump back on, and I couldn't be more excited, man. I told you before the show, I love what you do. I love your podcast. I think you're writing a book too, and I'm super excited for that to come out. Unless I'm wrong and it's already come out, but
it's not out yet, man. I'm only like half finished with it, dude, because I'm a terrible writer and I go back and critique it too much. I need to stop doing that and finish it.
Yeah, that's all right, man. It's about the passion that I know you have behind the subject that you're writing about. So I'm excited for when that comes out. But let's kick this thing off with you introducing yourself, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, I'm Jim Huntsman, the host of the Western Huntsman Podcast. I lifelong hunter, grew up out west here. I grew up in Utah. Left Utah in 1999 for the military, and after the military, I came up to North Idaho. And with the exception of a few years back down in Utah for a job I took, I've been up in North Idaho ever since, man. And so super passionate about elk hunting, bear hunting, deer hunting. It depends on what season it is, because if you ask me during turkey season, turkey's my favorite thing to hunt. But come September, obviously elk is my favorite thing to hunt. So I love hunting all of it, and I love protecting hunting. And I see some of the things that we have challenge wise facing us in the future. And I'm really enthusiastic about protecting that and helping hunters kind of come together and protect what we do have, because we have a beautiful thing, man, in America. It's great to be American. We're free. We have public land systems that are just unheard of throughout the world. And we have a great wildlife management system through hunting, and it's just a great thing, and I'm passionate about it, and I'm passionate about talking about it and defending it.
Yeah, and you show it. And so everyone listening, please check out Jim's podcast. It is one of my personal favorites. I think the Western Huntsman and Elk Bros and Elk Shape are like the three that I listen to every episode on. So man, and
hey, we got good taste together, man. I love Elk Shape and the Elk Bros.
Yeah, they're all good guys. I've now actually had all of the Elk Bros on except for Chav. So the Ninja, I got to get the Ninja on.
Yeah, you got to get him on, man.
Yeah, but he's so soft spoken. Like, it's either gonna be just like very quiet, not much of anything because he doesn't want to talk, or it'll be the most epic episode we've ever had. Because I heard when he talks, the elk listen. Like elk shut up and listen. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. You should get him on, man. I've actually never heard him on a podcast by himself, but I'm getting Joe on the show in the next couple of weeks to kind of recap his season. He had a great season. So I always love talking to Joe. Super enthusiastic guy.
Yeah. Couldn't be a kinder human too.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, cool, Jim. Well, you know how this thing works. We don't beat around the bush. We don't really go do anything extracurricular. We just want to hear your favorite stories. So if you have one in mind, why don't you kind of set the stage for us?
Yeah, I kind of did. When you first asked me, I'm like, man, it's not, I've listened to a couple of your episodes, and these guys have really good stories that, of just these epic hunts, going after bighorn sheep and all this stuff. And it's just not really me. It's interesting being a podcast host in the hunting space, because I'm not like your Aaron Schneiders or your Chris Rose or these guys with these crazy tags they've had and crazy amounts of success. I'm like your average hunter. Sometimes I feel a tag and sometimes I don't. And so I really racked my brain, but I do have a couple interesting stories.
And you know what? Average hunters are who we want to hear from. I've got a bunch of stories, and I'm a below average hunter. So I'm excited to hear what you have.
Well, I'm definitely below average. I'm just good at talking about it sometimes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'll set the stage, man. I mentioned kind of in the introduction there. When I left Utah back in '99, I joined the Marines, and the damn recruiter told me that I was going to be stationed in California, which would have boded well for a Western hunter, and I would have been fine driving to the states close to California and even hunting California. California is actually an underrated hunting state. So anyway, point being, I go through boot camp, right? And I become a Marine. And then what I had done is signed up for the infantry. And so they send me to School of Infantry School, which is out in San Diego, California, Camp Pendleton, California. I go through that, still I'd be stationed there. And as infantry school comes to a close, we get our orders. And I'm there's like 30 of us in this company, a graduating company. And I'm like one of 8 people that they're like, oh yeah, no, you're going to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And I'm like, what the hell's with that? Where is North Carolina? I don't even know where it's at, and they're like, yeah, you're going to North Carolina with 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines, whatever. I'm like, shit, that sucks. That's a long way from elk hunting and everything that I was used to, right?
How long ago was this? Now there's a couple, Kentucky, Pennsylvania. There's elk popping up in that area.
Elk over there. Yeah, they're getting elk over there.
How long ago was this?
This was 1999. This would have been like June of no. This would have been like end of July of 1999 when I get my orders to go to Camp Lejeune. And I'd never even heard of Camp Lejeune. My recruiter left everything east of the Mississippi out by convenience or something. So anyway, they put me on a plane and I fly to Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. And it's July, right? And if anybody has never experienced the heat, which you're about to because you're moving to Texas, he said. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that on the show, actually.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Anyway, if you've never experienced the heat and humidity of the Southeast, you don't know what you're missing. Like there's no point in even taking a shower in the morning because you'll be sweating by 6:30 in the morning. And I get off this plane and I'm like, what is this? This is like sorcery. What is this shit? And I'm sweating and dying. Yeah, the bugs everything. And they put me on a bus, and the base is like 2 hours from the airport, right? And so I'm like, okay, cool. I'll get to check out the countryside. It's still daylight. And I see these little ass deer on the drive back on our way to Camp Lejeune. These little deer, and they're whitetail. And for a dude that grew up in Utah, I'd never actually seen a whitetail before. I mean, that wasn't true. I'd made a couple trips back east when I was in high school or whatever, but never really paid attention to them. Yeah. So now I'm really paying attention to them because here I am. They're like, you're going to the East Coast, the Camp Lejeune, into the South, and right on coastal North Carolina. Never been there. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm stuck here for 4 years. I have to go and I have to live in Camp Lejeune for 4 years. And so I have to get used to this thing and figure out how I'm going to hunt it because, it wasn't any different back then than it is now. Hunting was life. And so driving on the bus, looking out the window, looking at all these little deer in these fields, the difference and I guess a big surprise. In fact, I had this conversation on my show today, earlier for a recording, but a huge epiphany for me once I got to North Carolina and got settled in. I went out to town and bought me this little truck, this little Ford Ranger, and so I can kick around in North Carolina and check out all these spots to hunt and fish because I love to do both. And I even bought a little $800 bass boat that was a piece of shit and left me stranded on the river many times. I'm getting out there and getting settled in. And during the time off that you get from the Marines, I'm in my truck looking for places to hunt because remember, I get there at the end of July and hunting season's coming up. Oh yeah. And I was surprised to learn, where I grew up, you could buy one deer tag and you could shoot one deer and that was it. Well, I was surprised to find out that you could do for $40, you get what they called the sportsman's permit. And that gave you 6 whitetail. You could shoot like 2 bears, all your pheasant and upland game, waterfowl. You still had to get the duck stamp, but you still hunt waterfowl and your fishing license and small game and all that kind of stuff. So I spend the $40 and get this tag, this permit, and get in the truck and I start looking around all over North Carolina. I'm just, this is back before, the internet obviously existed. I didn't have it, and I didn't even have an email back then, and nobody had cell phones. Only rich people had cell phones. I felt like,
Yeah.
And so there's no Onyx, there's no base maps, there's no hunt. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank on it. What is that company called? Why am I drawing a blank on that?
Not sure which one you're talking about.
Go Hunt.
Go Hunt.
Sorry,
okay.
Go Hunt.
Yep.
There's no Eastman's Tag Hub. There's none of this stuff, right?
No HuntWise. All that stuff.
None of that. And so what I did is I went to this store and I bought, this map, and it doesn't do a good job of pointing out, what's public land, what's private land. And again, growing up out west, this is how I was raised, man, is we hunted, we fished, we camped all summer long. We were on public land. We're in the national forest areas of Idaho and Wyoming and Utah. And we even went into Colorado a few times, and Nevada. And it was a normal thing. You just jump on a dirt road and you're on public land. You can camp anywhere. We didn't go to campgrounds. We didn't go to like designated camp spots where you pay a fee to stay the night. We just went and pulled off in some primitive spot and either set up tents or parked our trailers. And this is what life was. This is what we did, right?
Yeah.
So getting out there, I'm cruising all these roads trying to find these areas to go off and do this kind of stuff, because that's what I knew. And all I see are no trespassing signs everywhere. There's like no trespassing here, no trespassing there. And it's crazy to me. There's no mountains. Coastal North Carolina is like Kansas with trees. If you cleared all the trees out, you'd be able to watch your dog run away for 3 days because it's so flat. And it's just, that's what it is. That's coastal North Carolina. And there's these big goddamn cottonmouth snakes around every corner. Which I hated. I'd much rather prefer to have these, rattlesnakes I was used to back home. The point is I couldn't find anywhere to hunt. I couldn't find public land. All the fields were private. Everything was private property. Everything was posted. And none of the locals liked military guys being stationed in their state trying to hunt their land. And so getting permission was like next to impossible. Finally, I find this chunk of national forest. It's a very small chunk of national, like you're in Colorado, right now?
Yep.
Like, you can get in the national forest there and spend a week without seeing anybody else.
Not during hunting season, but the rest of the year.
Maybe not during hunting season. But here, this little chunk of public land was called the Croatan National Forest. And had a river kind of running through it, had a couple of random little lakes out there. And I wish I could compare the size, but it's like where I live now, if you cross the highway from my property, you go into the Coeur d'Alene National Forest and you can get lost in there and nobody will ever find you. It's huge. Yeah. It's wildly huge. And this is not like that. The Croatan National Forest has like 4 roads going through it. And you just really won't get lost. You're going to come out the other side at some point and find a highway. So I'm scouting this area, and I'm like, okay, I've got to be. I'm obviously not going to be the only dude that knows this is public land, and so, but I want to get a whitetail. I've never shot a whitetail buck, and I really want one. And so I'm kind of scouting. I'm looking at all these roads, and I find this end of it. I want to say it was like the west end of the forest, the national forest. Okay. I find
real quick, Jim, are you archery or rifle? Are you archery or rifle hunting?
So at this point, I'm rifle hunting. Okay. I hadn't even started archery hunting yet at this point. I had actually, when you're in the military, they have these stores on base called the PX, and that's where it's called the post exchange. It's like a Walmart in a way, in a sense, and that's where you can buy all your everything. They have like a sporting goods department. They have where you can buy, uniforms and groceries and all this stuff. So I go to the PX a couple months prior to this and put this 30-06 with some chintzy ass scope on it, on layaway. And it was like a $250 rifle that took me 2 months to pay off because you don't make much in the military, especially back then. So I was planning to rifle hunt. So I'm out scouting, and I'd sighted in this 30-06 deer season is in like a month at this point. I'm still a month away. And I find this dead end road, this dirt road I follow. I follow up this dirt road, and all of a sudden it's like a dead end. The road actually keeps going, but you know how they'll dig like a culvert out to keep people from driving up it? There's one of those, and there are these signs posted on the tree that said Paradise Hunting Club. And I'm like, okay, so this is like private land where people pay to go hunt or whatever. Okay, so that's where I need to pause that part of it, and I need to back up about two weeks, or well, yeah, about a month, because we're getting close to October at this point. Hunting season's not far out, but we need to back up into like August. If anybody listening has been in the Marines, they will know what I'm talking about, and they will know the pain when I say Marines like to run. They love to make you run. And Mike, I freaking hate running, dude. I still hate running. I hate running. It is like, for me, I played high school ball, and they'd make us run, and I almost quit high school ball over it. So then I joined the Marines. You don't have the choice of quitting, but you have to run. So 4 times a week, there's morning PT. You're out there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you're running like 3 miles. And the goal, and I was pretty good at it, man. I did a 3 mile minute, or I'm sorry. That'd be
I was like, wow.
3 miles in 18 minutes was my best time. And that's like a perfect score in the Marines. That's kind of what the goal is, you know?
Yeah, I'm nowhere near that. I don't think if you combine all the running I've done in my life, gotten to 3 miles yet. So
I don't think I could do 3 miles in 18 minutes on a 4-wheeler today. That's how slow I am now. And so the point is I hate running. Well, one little thing, and I used to be embarrassed to tell this story, but I'm just not anymore. It is what it is, right? Something that can happen when you run a lot is a thing called testicular torsion. And it's where your giblets are bouncing so much that they'll actually start twisting up inside your body. And it is
no way,
Mike, it is fucking excruciating pain. Okay. Like, it is super, super painful.
I believe it, man.
So we're on this like battalion run, Camp Lejeune. We're doing the cadence, and running on base. It's, whatever time in the morning, early. And all of a sudden I felt like I really had to pee. And I'm like, fuck, I'm like going to have to fall out of this run to go pee in the woods or something and then catch back up. I really had to pee. And I started slowing down and kind of moving out of the formation. And all of a sudden I get this god awful, excruciating pain down in the region. Right. And I basically fall over in the road, and I'm just holding down there because this testicular torsion had hit me. And
so real quick, is this like a thing that over time built up and then it got to the point where you all of a sudden were like, oh shit? Or was this just like boom, like twist?
For me, it was boom and twist, but it is something that would have built up. I just didn't notice it. Didn't notice it. And so they like, at first, I'm one of the newer Marines. So they're like yelling and screaming, what the hell's wrong with you? Get up and get back in formation, start running, blah, blah, blah. And then they realize, no, this dude's like hurt, man. We need to get him over to the hospital. So they take me.
And is it? I gotta ask, just because this
go
is
ahead. Yeah, no, nothing
I've ever heard of in my life. Is this a pain like when you get kicked in the nuts? Right, it's kind of in the lower abdomen that it hurts. Is this lower abdomen pain, or is this actual testicular pain?
It's in the nuts, man, and it is in the lower abdomen. Like, it is terrible.
All of it.
It radiates up your back and everything. I mean, it was the worst pain I've ever felt, and I've been in a lot of pain before. So what happens to prevent that, for anybody that might be listening that's thinking about joining the Marines or just as a big time runner, it's not something that happens to everybody, right? I mean, a lot of people, they'll run 5 times a week their whole life and never have this. Other people, it'll get you. So you have to support. Pardon my French, but you have to support your balls when you go running, like wear the tighter underwear kind of thing. You know what I mean? Because it's the bouncing that did it to me, as per the doctor. And so so this is what happened. And it's not like I knew this was coming. I had no warning of it. It was just suddenly, all of a sudden, I had this god awful pain and fell out of this run. And next thing I know, I'm in a Humvee and they're taking me over to the Naval Hospital. The Marine Corps does not have a medical division or part of it. Everything is run through the Navy. And so I'm at the hospital and they're kind of telling me what's going on. And they're like, okay, so basically we have to open up the sack and tack those bad boys back down. Right. And it's a surgery.
Untwist them, do it.
Yeah. They have to kind of unfuck the whole thing. And it sucks. And so the problem is I had to wait like 3 weeks or something for this to happen. So back to the story where I was scouting and found this dead end road where it said Paradise Hunting Club. That was like a week before I was going to have the surgery and like a week before season opened.
And so what was it like during that gap? Like, it was obviously a bad boom, like right when you hit it. But for those 3 weeks, was it horrible?
They were able to like get them kind of back into place, just, grabbing the shit and messing with it,
tugging and pulling.
Yeah. So they kind of did that and they got them set and they in the military, they call it light duty. They put me on light duty. I'm not allowed to like go running. I'm not allowed to go training in the field, no jumping out of helicopter, nothing, You just basically stand around at the barracks and you answer phones and make your bed and shit. I don't know. I don't even remember what I did back then, but, so that's what I did for like 3 weeks. And finally, I was still out there looking for spots to hunt. And I finally found this national forest and found this road I'm telling you about. Well, I'm like a week out from getting surgery and a little over a week before deer season starts. And I am determined, man, to go hunting. And so I tried to get the doc to either bump my surgery forward or push it back. And this is before I knew anything about whitetail hunting. I didn't know that, because season there went from like October to December. I didn't know that they'd be running in November and that'd be a better time to hunt. So I really, this is what happens before technology exists and there's, podcasts out there to learn all this kind of stuff. So, I find this spot and my thinking was, okay, I don't know anything about whitetail hunting, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to park up this road and I'm going to hike in a few hundred yards off this road and wait for these dudes on this private hunting club, Paradise Hunting Club. I say their name in case they are still around and I hope they get butthurt about me hunting right on the border. Cause I set like 10 feet off the, where the private property boundary was, hoping that they'd chase a buck off. So I go in and I have this surgery on a Monday. Deer season opened on a Wednesday. And the Monday you have the surgery and, they put you under and everything. I mean, it's a major surgery. They put me under and like I wake up several hours later, my balls are the size of cantaloupe. And they've got like me all bandaged up and they give me a ride back to the barracks and say, okay, Huntsman, you're on bed rest for 2 weeks. You're not allowed to leave your room. You have to stay on bed rest and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, that ain't going to happen because it's deer season. The whole battalion like goes on this training thing out in the field. When you go in the field, you spend the night, they're out somewhere else in Camp Lejeune, spending the night. Doing training and whatnot. So I'm like there alone and I go on opening morning and waddled my ass from the barracks to where my truck was parked out in the parking lot. And when I say waddled, I mean, I'm not kidding you, man. I could barely walk. And you have to walk. You remember the cartoon? What was that cartoon? Yosemite Sam, how bow-legged he was after, from riding his horse, all that. That's kind of what I look like walking out to my truck. And so I'm just kind of waddling out to my truck, load everything up, and I go out there and park the truck. It's just about sunrise and whatnot. Get my stuff on, and I'm thinking, this isn't like the West where I grew up. I'm not hiking miles in. I'm only going like 300 yards max to sit on this spot where I found that had this trail, and it was a pretty highly used trail coming out of the Paradise Hunting Club. And so that's what I was doing. Hang on. Park the truck. and I start walking in. And immediately I realize that walking on the grass from the barracks to the parking lot was one thing, but walking in the forest of North Carolina, which is pretty damn brushy and uneven, is a totally other thing, a totally new thing. And it was super painful. I took like 4 ibuprofens, and I'm walking in, and it takes me a good 2 hours. Cause gosh, what time of day was that? I think I parked the truck at like 6. You could barely see light in the sky. It was longer than that, because I remember it was like 9:20. This is back in the day when I wore a wristwatch. And it was like 9:20 when I finally got to this spot, and I was sore as all get out. And I found this spot where I could see this trail. Let me back up just a sec, because on the drive in, this will blow your mind for anybody that hasn't ever hunted in like North Carolina. These dudes go out with dogs to hunt deer. And it's the craziest damn thing. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. What they do is they actually take, like, have you ever seen the front seat on a bass boat? You know, those little like stool looking seats with and they swivel and all that. They like mount those to their toolboxes or the back of their truck, and they pull up with their dogs, and they sit on those with their rifle, and they release the dogs, and the hounds go into the woods and apparently chase deer back to them. And so this is opening day deer season. So these locals, these major, like, these are true blue Southerners, right? And like the guy, you could barely understand what they're saying, but they're good dudes. And so I was kind of BSing with one of them, because they were getting their spot early. So when I'm pulling in on the dirt road, these guys are parked on the side, and I roll my window down, and this guy's telling me, well, you're not going to get a deer without dogs. And I'm like, what do you mean without dogs? What are you talking about? You hunt deer with dogs?
I've never even heard of anyone hunting deer with dogs.
Yeah, right. I hadn't either. And I'm like, this isn't pheasant hunting, man. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, yeah, no, you goddamn, you ain't going to get no deer without a dog. You know, and I'm like, wow, I understand every other word, and I think you're wrong. I'm going to go try to get a deer anyway. And so I leave that guy, and I go and I park, and again, it takes me like over 3 hours to walk into the spot, and again, 300 yards maybe.
Yeah.
And I sit down, and by this time it's obviously past 9 a.m. It's super bright. And I thought I'd kind of blown it, and didn't realize it was going to take me so long to waddle in there with my recent surgery. And this, I can hear in the distance hounds going nuts and barking, and like they're chasing deer for these dudes back on the main road, which was like a mile away, but I could still hear the dogs going crazy. So I just sat there. And again, I sat down. It took me, I don't know, 5 minutes to sit down with the type of injury I had. Well, surgery I had. It was pretty sensitive trying to sit down. I mean, I'm just going to say,
like one of those donut pillows with
right? I needed something, man. My balls hurt, and it was pretty extreme. So took me a while to sit down. And so I sit down. I get settled in. I check my rifle, make sure my scope's set in that position number 3 or whatever, pretty close shot. And I'm just kind of watching this trail. And it wasn't 10, maybe 15 minutes go by, and I hear something walking down the trail. And I'm not, this is the funniest damn thing. Not even kidding you. This, what they call a 6-point, I would have called it a 3-point. 3-point buck all of a sudden appears on this trail. And all that homework I had done on this private hunting club, right? I'm like, okay, this is a deer hunting club. That's all they do. They don't do anything else. They deer hunt on it. And you have to purchase a lease, because I looked into it after I'd first initially found it.
Yeah.
And I saw this trail prior to the surgery. I'd hiked in there. It took me like 5 minutes and found this trail. And I'm like, the only thing that makes sense is they're chasing the deer off this hunting club and pushing them into the national forest. And then the hound hunters on the other side were chasing them back to the hunting club. Right. And this is what I developed in my, 18, 19-year-old mind. And I was right there. I could hear the hunters over on the hunting club talking and pulling in with trucks and blah, blah, blah. And this is a big area, but it's flat. So you can hear a long ways. It's just heavily wooded. And I could hear them. And they sure as shit, they pushed this buck towards the national forest on that trail that I had found. And he's a little 3-point. And Like, dude, deer in coastal North Carolina are super small. They're not like, whitetails in North Idaho, or like a Colorado whitetail or a Texas whitetail or a Saskatchewan whitetail, nothing like that. I mean, these things are a glorified golden retriever with spikes on their head. And so he comes moving down the trail, and I'm like, holy crap, this thing's 40 yards from me, has no idea I'm here. I raise my rifle, and the trail kind of drops down a little bit into kind of this swampy area. There's a lot of swamps in coastal North Carolina. And it's like real tarry, dark, black water looking stuff. And it's the trail kind of goes down towards that, as if they go down there, drink water, and then kind of make their way back into the forest. And he was kind of on that trajectory when he came into my scope and I pulled the trigger. The deer drops like a bag of potatoes.
I'm so worried about you right now in this story, but go ahead.
So the shot on a 30-06 hurt my balls, if you're wondering. Yes, it hurt.
I'm worried about the pack out, man, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, we're getting there.
I know we are.
It gets better, because the deer doesn't just drop on the trail. Remember the swamp I told you about?
Oh,
the deer,
no. Okay. Yep.
The deer falls into the swamp. In the swamp. And I'm just surgery 2 days ago. I pull myself up, and I'm using my rifle to kind of as like almost a crutch to get myself back on my feet. And I'm looking down there, and I've got my hunter orange on. I think I'm in a pair of like Wranglers and cowboy boots too, because that's what I wore back then, and I'm looking down there, and I don't see the deer. It's like, I saw him drop in my scope. I know he's dead. I've seen a lot of deer go down at this point in my life. I know he's dead. I just can't see him. And so I start waddling over to where he was, and I see this kind of splatter of blood on the trail where he was standing. And I see like these marks where his hooves had kind of skifted up, but like a foot to the right is where the swamp started. So I look in the swamp, and like 2 inches of one of his tines was sticking above the water, and you can't even see inside. You can't see the deer at all because it's so dark and nasty water. It looks like oil, almost.
Oh no.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no.
And so I stand there, and I'm just kind of looking at the fact that it's not like it's right off the shore. Like this thing had kind of floated out several feet into the water, and it's not like it was knee deep. I mean, this shit was deep, obviously, because he sank, and he was just kind of floating there. And I'm like, holy crap, man, how am I going to get this buck out? Because another little factor here is there's alligators in coastal North Carolina, and I didn't know anything about alligators. I grew up in the 80s and 90s where all we knew was Crocodile Dundee. So I'm like, man, I don't know about this alligator infested swamp if I want to get this buck out.
Yeah, never mind your like surgical wound in swamp water. Ugh.
Well, and that's what I didn't think about.
No.
I just thought to myself, okay, I shot this buck. It's my first whitetail. It's my first whitetail buck I've ever killed in my life. I'm happier than a fat kid with a bag of Twinkies, man. I mean, I'd never in a million years thought that I'd get a whitetail buck. My first day out of hunting. So I set my rifle down, and I slowly start wading into the water, hoping and praying that it's only, a couple feet deep or whatever. It's not, and it's real muddy on the bottom. My feet start sinking. I took my cowboy boots off and was going in just my socks. And I get into the water far enough where I can grab this buck, and I'm waist deep at this point. My balls are underwater.
Oh no.
And I start dragging this sucker back. And that's when it hit me that I wasn't supposed to shower or anything to get these things wet. Right. Because I had this incision on my balls. Was not supposed to
the
get
doctor
wet.
Never said submerge it in swamp water.
He didn't say shit about going into the swamp, but I didn't think about it. So I'm in this swamp, and that's when I realized, I'm like, oh man, I am in trouble. I'm going to get North Carolina jungle bacteria in my balls, and I'm done. I'm toast. I was like it was panic mode. But at the same time, I'd already grabbed the antlers and was kind of slowly dragging him back towards the bank. And so I was committed at this point. I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna die or lose my balls over some kind of weird bacteria in this North Carolina swamp, I'm gonna at least get my buck. And so I drag him to the shore. I make my way. I had to like sit down on my butt on the shore and use only my arms to pull this buck out of the water, because I couldn't use my legs or anything for that, right? Because it would have strained what I had going on down there. And it took me about an hour to gut this deer. And I'm just like, everything is taking forever. By the time I get the buck out of the water, gutted, and I even cut the lower legs off to help me drag him out. It's noon. It's like noon at this point. And so I have a 300-yard or so walk back to my truck with this buck, and I've got to drag him. And I'm not supposed to, like bed rests are like, don't lift over 5 pounds, and they're giving me all these instructions, post-op instructions or whatever. So long story short, by the time I get this buck back to my truck, which this was an inch at a time, I had to like kind of move my whole body. I put my wet socks into my cowboy boots, which didn't help the situation. I'd have to like take a step and kind of do this weird sideways bend over thing and grab the antlers and move him a little bit until I started feeling it down on the incision that I had. Like I would physically feel the pain start hitting it. So I'd stop and I'd wait and I'd bend down and I'd move him like another few inches or whatever. And this went on for a long time. I mean, it was almost dark by the time I got back to my truck. And remember how I told you they dug that little culvert thing to keep people from driving into the private ranch? Well, they left a hill on that side. So I turned my truck around and backed it up to that hill and dropped the tailgate to where, the hill basically made it even. And so I didn't have to lift the buck up, but I did have to pull him up that hill a little bit. But I used a rope in my truck to help me do that. And that wasn't a huge deal. So then I got him into the truck, shut the tailgate. By this time it is, the sun is starting to set. And it's like October. So it's not like, right now the sun, like in North Idaho, dude, the sun is setting at like 3:45 right now in the afternoon because of how far north we are. It's annoying. And so, I get the buck in the truck, and I get myself in the truck, start the truck up, and I start driving down the road. And who do you think was sitting there? Was that backwoods North Carolinian dude who told me I'd never get a buck without dogs. And he saw me coming, and he's still sitting in the back of his truck. Been there all day, him and his buddies, and he'd been there all day. He's still sitting in the back of his truck. He's probably got, an 18 pack of beer already downed. And he's got this shit-eating grin as he sees my truck coming back, because he thinks I'm making the drive back home, the drive of shame, empty-handed back home. And so I get up to his truck, and he's sitting in the back, and I kind of roll my window down and look at him and smile. And all of a sudden he sees something in the back of my little Ford Ranger, and it's those antlers and that buck. And his shit-eating grin went from shit-eating grin to, how in the world did that happen? Because they've got nothing. They hadn't shot anything all day.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Hey, boy, how did you get that goddamn beer in the back of your truck?" And he just asking me questions. I just kept driving too. I didn't want. I was in too much pain, and I was too exhausted to stop and be friendly and chit chat. So I just kept on going, and he just looked at me in like wonder, and he didn't even know the circumstance of my recent surgery, and so he doesn't even know how hard that was. He had no idea. And so to this day, man, I have made pack outs and hikes and backcountry trips and stuff like that, in treacherous Western terrain, up and down mountains, elevation gains and losses, slipping down, rock faces, and all sorts of crazy, insane stuff that I've done. To this day, that is still my most difficult pack out on a buck ever.
300 yards.
That's my, there you go, man. That's my story on my first whitetail.
That's an amazing story. And I want to just say, I'm making an assumption here that the boys made it out just fine, and the swamp water was neither here nor there.
Yeah. So I don't know what happened. I obviously they got soaked, right?
Yeah.
And all my bandaging got soaked. And like the doc, even I had to go back in for like a checkup or whatever a week later. He's like, what the fuck happened to these bandages? Like, why are they all blackish and like, what is this? And I kind of explained the story to him, in a quick little nutshell there. And he kind of thought it was funny. He was a good old boy for a
Yeah.
doctor, and thought it was pretty funny, and just rebandaged me. And he checked it out. He's like, "You're lucky that didn't get infected." Like, I can't believe it didn't get affected, but nothing
Yeah.
happened. Nothing ever got infected in it. And
God,
and
that's
so
amazing.
I waddled around for like 2 more weeks, and they healed up fine. And my biggest concern is they told me, this could affect having kids if it doesn't heal right, and blah blah blah. Nope. Worked just fine for that. I've got two great daughters that
Yeah.
love dearly, and so yeah, everything's fine, and it never happened again. I did buy like tidy whitey underwear to run in for the rest of my time in the Marines,
Yeah. High
and
and tight.
yeah, those nice tidy whitey bastards that it would just keep those giblets from juggling around too bad. So that's what I
That's so
did.
crazy. That is so crazy, man.
Yeah.
When you told me
Nobody's
you were
ever
out
even
there,
heard of it.
as soon as you shot that deer in your story, I was like, oh no, he's got to get that out. And then the swamp.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
Jim,
nuts.
yeah, pun intended, right?
Yeah, I would never do that. I would never do that today. I like
Yeah.
I'm getting old now. I'm 42 now. So we're talking over 20 years ago at this point, and everybody does dumb stuff, I guess, when they're young, and that was one of the dumber things I did, because I did, man, halfway back to my truck, there were times I considered leaving that buck and going and getting a buddy or something to help me get it out, but running the risk of coyotes getting it. And I thought about driving
Alligators.
down and alligators. I thought about driving to, yeah, the alligators are something else, man. I'd be bass fishing on these rivers, and all of a sudden I'd be fishing off of one side of my boat, and I turn around and there's an alligator like just floating in the water. And one of them, I nailed him in the head with my paddle, because when you have a boat, you got to have a paddle on there or whatever for the safety. So I had this big wood paddle, and he was just kept swimming up to my boat. And I was, what the hell, man? This thing's like 7 feet long. I didn't know anything about alligators, and I didn't have a gun or anything. And I was panicked, like, is he going to crawl on my boat and eat me? So I grabbed that paddle, whack, and knocked him right over the head. And he went underwater, never saw him again.
There you go. Some other fisherman was probably feeding him guts or something.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that was nuts. North Carolina was something else, man. It was something else. But
yeah, that's funny. I have a
was,
buddy who he went elk hunting with me this year for a late November hunt, but then he went right back to North Carolina and he just blasted a couple does. Like you said, you get a bunch of tags with the North Carolina license.
Hell yeah.
So he went out for 2 days, got 2 does. So his freezer's full. So he's a happy
crazy
guy.
There were deer. I mean, they have a lot of deer. They're not very big, but I think as you get over towards the Smoky Mountains and that western part of North Carolina, the deer, they get bigger. I went over there and tried to hunt a couple times, but I never had enough time to commit to it. But they do get bigger, and I don't know legality wise if the whole state's like that, but where I was at, you can shoot 6 deer on one tag.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, every deer you just kind of, there was this little notch for each deer you got, and you just notched it the day you got it. And yeah, it was cool. I never shot 6 deer in one season though.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I'm moving to Texas, but I did live there for a year previously, and I know that their tags, you buy the super combo or whatever it's called, and you get, I think, 4 deer, like one mule deer, 3 different turkeys, like maybe 4 turkeys, like 3 Eastern, 1 Rio. I don't know, but you get all sorts of stuff for pretty reasonable, $70 or something like that.
You get like an ostrich tag and a lion tag.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Jim,
Texas
man, that was a great
else.
story. It is. I'm excited. I'm hoping to take advantage of some of that crazy hunting they have. I know finding access is the hardest part, so I'm hoping to get through that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully you got a bunch of money.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. But I do have a buddy who has a buddy who has an aoudad ranch. So hopefully we'll be going aoudad hunting. So
let me know, man. Let me know. Hit me up. I'll come down there.
yeah, right. Jim, man, that was a great story. I don't know if you want to call it right there, save some for another day, or if you have some other stories you want to tell us, we can go as long as you want, man.
I can tell one more story about that has kind of a lesson for hunters in terms of like hunting ethics. If you want,
let's do it.
No,
you want to do that?
Yeah. One more. How long we've been recording here? I don't even know, but I'm good for one.
Not long enough. Not long enough.
Yeah. So the other story is so I want to tell it because I think it's important for people to hear how sometimes things can play out in a sense of when we're thinking about as a big let me start this way. A big topic on my show is the way like hunters treat each other and the way we interact with each other. And you've seen it on social media, the way that you shoot a 6.5 Creedmoor where where's your man bun because I shoot a 308 or a 300 Win Mag, or you're a bow hunter versus a rifle hunter versus a muzzle loader, and the shit we give each other. Hunters are very opinionated kind of people, and which is good, but it's good and bad. I keep losing my headphones here. So I tell this story from a sense of not disparaging people for doing it this way, but hoping that people kind of get a lesson and being a little bit more cognizant about what they're doing and how they're affecting and how they're portraying hunting out there. So I think that's why I tell the story. Does that make sense how I'm explaining that?
Yeah. I have some comments, but I'm going to save them for later because I think this is awesome. So continue.
Okay. So the mule deer story, the whitetail story in North Carolina with the sore balls, that happened in like 99. And so I'm in the Marines for a lot longer than that. I end up getting out in fact, crazy story. I was supposed to get out. My EAS, my end of enlistment, was supposed to be like March 9th of 2003. Well, for anybody old enough, you might remember that on March like 18th or 19th of 2003, the Iraq War started. And that big invasion into Baghdad and taking over Iraq and kicking Saddam Hussein out and all that kind of stuff. That happened in the spring of 2003, the same spring I was supposed to EAS and get out of the Marine Corps. So do you think they let me out? Nope.
No, sir.
They made me stay. They said, in fact, we were already overseas, like chasing around terrorists and shit in like Africa. And we were supposed to be heading home. And we get back on the ship in Africa. And the captain comes over the ship and they're like, well, we got bad news for the Marines. We got to turn around. You guys, we're offloading you in Kuwait to go into Iraq. We're like, what? What is going on in Iraq? We don't even know that a war is about to start in Iraq. This is when they were doing that big buildup. All the troops are, building up there in Kuwait prior to the war starting. So a week after I was supposed to get out, I'm stuck in Kuwait. And the Iraq War begins, and we become one of the first units to cross into Iraq when the Iraq War started, and did that whole initial drive into Baghdad, and was there for all that time. And then I don't even know if I've told this story on my podcast, but anyway, go through all that, and then by the end of 2003 or whatnot, they finally bring us home. Actually, it was mid 2003. Bring us home, get us out of Iraq. We get back on the ships, come home. Those of us that were supposed to get out in that time that were what is called stop lost. When you're on stop loss in the military, it means you're past your enlistment, but they're making you stay in, basically. They process us when we get home. They process us out of the military within like 2 weeks. So imagine, if you will, in like a 30-day time period, you go from combat to civilian life. That's what happened. So I get out and I come home to Utah, and I'm no longer in the Marines. no longer active, and everything was great. I was all excited. I was going to be a civilian again, and I could do what I want. I don't have to get haircuts. I don't have to fucking shave. And guess what? I don't have to run anymore. I never have to. I will never. And honestly, man, I keep myself in pretty good shape, but I have not gone on like some long run since I was in the Marines, and I won't.
And you threw out all of your whitey tidies, right?
I did. I threw out all the whitey tidies. Not doing those anymore. And I'm not going on runs anymore. And I'm never getting testicular torsion ever again. I just was over it, man. Over it. So I get out, and I got out, and because, of the war and everything else that had gone on, I really gave no thought to what I was going to do with my life. Once I got out, all I knew is I got out and I was a civilian again and had to figure out what the hell I was going to do with my life. I'm like 23 at this point. And so a buddy of mine, Adam, owned a construction company up in Spokane, Washington, and which is right next door to North Idaho. This is how I ended up in North Idaho.
Okay.
Spokane, Washington is right on the border of Idaho and Washington. And cool little he had a company up there, and him and I had been buddies since we were just little kids. And so he's like, "Hey man, you can come up here and work construction with me." And I thought, okay, I'm going to do that while I go to college, and I'll work for you. And I got the GI Bill to help pay for college, and all this stuff. Well, side note, the GI Bill did not pay my college. I have student loans because the GI Bill ended up paying for my nights out and liquor. Bad idea. Little piece of advice for some of you younger dudes getting out of the military: don't use your GI Bill to go to the bar. That's what I did. So I move up to Spokane, Washington, and I'm living in Spokane. In fact, I'm living in my buddy's like basement. He's got this basement room and everything, and he let me stay there. This I ended up being like the spring of 2004. But I don't remember. It was like 6 months to get your residency in Washington. And I was obviously, like any other time in my life, super excited to go hunt deer. And that fall, I get my deer tag, and I'm working for my buddy Adam. I'm in college. I'm doing all this, like I'm doing night school for college, because I'm working during that. We're framing houses and shit for him. Anyway, get a deer tag. This is after I'd been scouting Washington for a couple of particular units that I was interested in hunting. Found some big bucks. It was really weird, man. Back then they had this stipulation, like a limit. What did I call that? A point limit for when you draw a deer tag in that area. There was like some units had to be a minimum of 2 point. Other units had to be like a minimum of 3 points. And this unit that I really wanted to hunt was like a bigger one. I can't remember. This is, again, almost 20 years ago. I can't remember what it was, but it was like either 4 or 5 point buck in order to shoot it. Yeah, it was a legal buck. It was an insane limit. Like this is the only place I've ever seen this. And so you really had to be careful with what you were doing. But I did find a couple of 5 point bucks. And these were mule deer on the plains of Montana. You don't think of the plains when people think of Washington, not Montana. I'm sorry, Montana. I didn't mean to say that. I'm talking about Washington. Plains, Montana isn't very far from me, so I always think of that. But I'm on the plains of Washington, which you start heading towards Seattle out of Spokane, and Washington goes from the Evergreen state to looking more like a little less flat of a Kansas. And
hot as hell too. I lived in Seattle for about 4 years, and when you get over the Cascades, it is flat and hot. And in the winter, cold. It's cold. It's cold as all get out. Super cold.
It's actually really cool mule deer country. So Washington has some absolutely just epic hunting areas, and I think it's an underrated hunting state. There's some great opportunity in Washington.
I have some points that I'm debating whether or not I'm ever going to get around to, because you have to buy the license before you can get the points.
They don't make it easy for non-residents, man. They don't make it easy for residents even, but for non-residents it's even harder. But Washington has some great opportunity hunting wise, and it's too bad they manage it the way they do, especially with their commission recently getting rid of the spring bear season and all that. Anyway, I won't get off topic. I get this tag, and I'm out in this area. I don't want to give it away because it really is a good spot, but it's not. I'll give people a hint. It's towards Seattle, but not very far from Spokane. Like you'd be there in less than an hour, um, give or take, not super far off of I-90. Anyway, I draw that.
I'm gonna guess after. We'll shut down the recording, and I'm gonna guess after, since I
Okay.
have hunted
Okay.
roughly that area.
All right, we'll talk about it. And I had dialed in this area where I knew there were these the hunt was taking place. I want to say it was a late September deer hunt, so the muleys were still early October maybe, but they were still battered up, right? And they're still. I kind of had a handle on a couple of different groups of bachelor bucks that were hanging out, and so to kind of give people an idea, the country is very much wide open with hills and like these empty river bottom kind of country, real open, not a lot of timber, almost plainsy, Kansasy looking, but not as flat, right? So I had hiked in, I'd found this area, and I'd hiked in and I'd located this bachelor group of bucks. And the leader of the group was this big 5-point buck. He was a good buck. Parked my truck and I walked like a mile into where I knew these bucks were hanging out. I did some preseason scouting, knew where they were at. And I was this dude that was like a buffalo farmer. He owned these buffalo, these bison, actually let me camp on his property. And so his name is Mike. Shout out to Mike. I don't know if he, even still around. He was an older guy. I helped him with some carpentry work on his little barn. And for that in trade, he would tell me where the deer were and let me camp on his property. So that's how that whole thing went down. But anyway, I go out there and I locate this herd, or not herd, but this little bachelor group. There's like 4 or 5 bucks, but only one's a legal shooter. There's a 5-point. And I'm kind of working my way through this river bottom. I did not know the country very well. And again, this is another story where this is prior to OnX and all the mapping systems out there available. I start making my way into this group and I notice the bucks are just kind of milling around on top of this hill, but I had to close the distance. I was like 500 yards away. And I say back then I wasn't confident taking that shot. Honestly, I wouldn't today. I usually max out. I'm more of an archery hunter, so I max out rifle wise at about 400 yards or so.
Yeah. I wouldn't ever take a shot past 3, but I am by no means a marksman with my rifle. So
yeah, it's interesting, man. I'm actually a 3rd award expert rifleman in the Marines, but that was all open sights, iron sights. So scopes are like this foreign thing to me. I'm still learning how to do them. I got a buddy that's he's actually coming on the show soon to talk about this real technical further shooting, distance shooting. Him and he's been on the show a few times. So anyway, that's where my limitation was. I didn't want to shoot, probably back then I probably didn't want to shoot past 300 yards, but they were like 500. So I needed to close the distance. Again, I don't know the terrain very well. I don't know. It's not like I'm out in the woods on some forest. This is all BLM land, and there's highways and there's spotty agricultural private spots and plots and things you had to be aware of. I'd been hunting coyotes out there all summer and had a heyday with coyotes. Anyway, so I start working my way in, and I'm kind of trying to close the distance on this 5-point. And he's not like a monster 5-point. He's simply as a legal buck. And that's because I am not a trophy hunter. I shoot. I'm not a brown, if it's brown it's down guy, but I'm also not I'm only going to shoot a, 200 class buck or whatever. It's not my thing. And it's even worse for elk. Poor elk. I feel bad for elk. If they have antlers, they're going down. Deer, I'm a little more picky. So anyway, start closing the distance. Well, at some point, something, and it wasn't me, something had spooked these bucks. And that hill I told you they were milling around on was like this big bare open hill with like sagebrush and like this wheatgrass kind of thing growing on it. And they got a little nervous, and it's not like they were shitting and getting, but they kind of started meandering to the other side of this hill and to the other side where I couldn't see them. And so I had to drop back down into the river bottom and which was an empty riverbed, right? And I used it to kind of cover my movement. And I start trucking it closer to this hill, and I knew that because they weren't moving fast, I made a bold assumption that they'd just be on the other side of this hill and standing there. So I make my way up the hill on the other side and sneak up and start kind of coming around. It's like a round hill. So I start side hilling this thing over to the other side to see if I could find these deer. And I was right. They were there. They were on the other side. They had no idea I was there. And the big buck, the 5-point, is standing behind this little forked horn. So I didn't have a shot at first. And at this point, they're like 80 yards from me. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm just going to wait for that little fork to move. Or if the big buck kind of, makes his way up a little higher, I've got a clear shot, 80 yards, super easy. I've got a rifle and scope. I'm going to make a great shot on this buck and drag him back out through that river bottom. What I didn't know, Mike, is there was a highway on the other side of this hill that I didn't even notice it when I walked around it and found the deer. And so and I'm not talking about, it's not like a dirt road. This is an actual highway, 2-lane highway.
Was it like busy or no? Because
not busy. Not busy at all, because I didn't hear any traffic. And that's kind of part of the story. It's not like anybody was on it. It's just an old, county kind of road out in the middle of nowhere kind of thing. But I think it's important to point out that it wasn't a dirt road. Obviously, I don't know that there's a state in the United States where it's legal to shoot from the road. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it's illegal everywhere. Anyway, I know it's illegal in Washington.
I know in Colorado and Texas.
Yeah. So I make my way. I make my way around this hill, and I've got this buck in my sights. I'm just waiting for him to clear from this forked horn, and all of a sudden I hear this truck. This is, if you've listened to my show, you know that I hate Dodge pickups. This is one of the reasons why I hate Dodge pickups. Big, stinky, gosh damn Dodge pickup. I hear this thing coming down the highway, and all the deer hear it too, and they kind of raise their heads and they're watching the highway. No big deal. But I'm like, oh crap, I hope this truck, I didn't know the highway was there. I thought I was like almost, backcountry status, because I'm a mile from where I parked my truck on a different road. And I'm watching the deer. I'm kind of panicking that they're about to spook. I'm wishing that 2-point would step out of the way so I could shoot the 5-point. And this truck's coming, and I'm like, oh man, I hope they don't spook the buck. And just to put it into perspective, the highway's probably 100 yards from where we're at, down the hill, down at the bottom of this hill. Now, we're probably 200 feet up, elevation wise.
Gotcha.
Truck comes up, notices a buck, stops. Some dude sticks his rifle out of the window of the truck and drops my 5-point.
No.
And interestingly, from what I found out later, they knew I was there. They knew I was there and I was hunting those bucks, but they didn't give a shit. They had an opportunity to come up and shoot this buck right out from underneath me. The reason I know they were there is because I was wearing bright orange, and I asked them, and they told me, "Oh yeah, well, no, we saw you, but we just figured you couldn't see him." Right, I believe you. So basically, they get out of the truck, they park the truck on the side of the highway, and start coming up, and they're high-fiving, and
and all the other deer buggered off.
Oh right? Yeah, they boogie. They're gone.
Yeah.
None of the other ones are legal. The biggest one in the group, besides that 5-point, was like this little 3x3, mule deer buck, whatever, just a young guy. And I wasn't after that anyway. I really did want a bigger buck. These guys get up to the deer, and I close the distance and make my way to them, and they notice me all of a sudden. They thought I'd left or something, and they get their faces turn ghost white when I walk up. And I said, "Well, nice shot. You got the buck." And they kind of had this look of relief, and they're like, "Oh, thanks, I appreciate it." And then I told them, I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds to get the fuck out of here, because you're taking this buck. Because I don't want it. I will not be taking a buck that I didn't shoot, but you better get this thing gutted and get the hell out of here, because I'm calling a game warden. You shot from the highway. You knew I was there. And this is after I'd asked them if they knew. Yeah, we saw you, but we figured you'd kind of left or whatever. And so I told him, I flat out told him, you guys, I'm in this. I was pissed, man. I'm
I'm
over a
sure.
mile. It's hot. It's a hard hunt. It's a very limited kind of opportunity unit. Not a lot of deer up there. And I'd been scouting and working for this buck. There was this one, and there was another little 5 point that I knew of that were the only two legal bucks in this entire unit that I had located personally. And these guys pull up like a bunch of jackasses and shoot them off the highway, right out from underneath me. So they did. They heard. I even helped them gut it. I even helped them gut this deer, and I said, "Get the hell out of here." I'm already calling the game warden, and I did have a cell phone at this point. They didn't know I didn't have service at that point, but I did call the game warden and I gave him the license and description of the truck. Because I'm not like a tattletale, man, but at the same time, we have to police ourselves. Like, why in the hell are we just road hunting off a highway? If that would have been, and this is why I emphasize the fact that this was a highway and not a dirt road. If that would have been a dirt road and I felt like they didn't know I was there, I would have scolded them. Had I to call the game warden? Probably not, man. Probably not. I'm just being totally honest. Is it still wrong? Yeah, absolutely, it's wrong. You don't shoot from the truck. But would I call the game warden? No. I am not going to say that I've done that from a dirt road, and I'm not going to say that I've done that from a dirt road when I was younger, right? And I think that anybody that has swears up and down that's never happened or whatever is full of it. We've all been there, especially those of us that grew up in the 90s. Come on now. But the thing is from a paved highway, they knew that hunter was there. It was just a shit show. And I'm sorry, it's unacceptable behavior. And, they destroyed my hopes and dreams temporarily. I say temporarily because a week later, I found another nice ass buck, and it happens to be the biggest mule deer I've ever shot. And it was in the state of Washington that year. So they did me a favor.
Yeah, right.
But I just wanted to highlight that because I think that, especially, here it is December. We're coming out of a lot of these hunting seasons. We still got, a few tags open here and there, but we're coming up on Christmas. And this is always that time of year that you see on like social media, things start getting heated up. Oh, these people ruined my hunt. Oh, these people stepped on my toes. Oh, they took my spot and blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot of complaining going on, and rightfully so in a lot of cases. But I think it's important, and it's a good time to remind people that, as hunters, we're all on the same side, and it's important that we stick to the ethical behavior and the ethical side of things. And I'm not talking about ethics following laws to a T. I'm talking about the etiquette part of ethics.
Absolutely.
Being a hunter that has etiquette and respect for other hunters. There is the ethics conversation that I think is also important. But to me, treating other hunters that are on your team, when we have so much opposition on the anti-hunting organization side, treating other hunters with respect and having the etiquette and respect for their area. And I know I shouldn't say their area. A lot of this is public land hunting. I agree. It's public land. It's our land. However, they got there first. Go to plan B, go to plan C, keep looking until you found your own drainage, your own mountain, your own field, your own whatever you're hunting, but don't step on people's toes and don't shoot deer from underneath them. Don't purposely harass an area or purposely harass a hunter. Don't trespass. Don't, all these things. I think that it's a conversation that people are afraid to have, and there's not enough of it going on. And so I wanted to tell that story to remind people that there's two sides to each story. And when you're wrecking somebody's hunt, you have no idea how much time, money, effort, and planning they put into it. And like, I do a lot of planning for my hunts, and especially because now I take my kids and my girls go out with me. And if somebody jacks up a hunt because they're rude and disrespectful and don't have any freaking etiquette, I have no patience for it. And that is what's going to kill us in the future. So hopefully there's a lesson in there.
I think there is. I absolutely think there is. In fact, it reminded me of this last November. I went on a late season elk hunt, and we were driving around, and my buddy, like every time we drive by and someone passes on our right, I start talking to him. We have this big conversation. On the left, my buddy just can't quite connect with him, and he's like, "Well, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I just ask him, how you doing? Having a good time?" And then the second question I always ask is like, okay, well, where are you going? I don't want to stomp on your toes. We're all out here having a good time. And all of a sudden I'm getting into 15-minute conversations with people telling me where they have a bull tag and I have a cow tag. And they're like, well, I saw a bunch of cows that way. Like, let me show you. In fact, this one guy, I was like, I have a cow tag. He's like, oh, me too. But I did find a bull. And I'm like, well, one person in my hunting party has a bull. And he walks us 200 yards to a glassing point and points us at a bull. And it's the only stock that we got on that entire trip. So just being kind, having conversations. Yeah. And like, if you roll up on someone, ask what their plan is so that you don't stomp on their toes. It goes a long way. Like, he put us on the best stock we had for the entire hunt. Unsuccessful hunt in the long run, but the most fun we had was meeting that guy, talking to him, pointing at a bull, and then going and chasing that bull. So like, it's all about working together.
It really is. And there's a way to if it is crowded out there, and I know that gets frustrated, or I'm sorry, I know it gets frustrating, but there is a way to use hunters to your advantage when you're deer hunting. And I'm talking specifically deer hunting without being a dick, without being, wrecking their hunt. Let them have a shot at that area. What you could do, and OnX makes this super easy, man. Deer are so predictable, especially mule deer. They're so predictable. Find where they're going to funnel when those hunters chase them out of that drainage or off that mountain.
Yep.
It's going to be super obvious. Get the contour lines out, find the easiest way off that mountain, and set up way away from those other hunters. And, they may get that buck, and you should go congratulate them and maybe help them pack it off, or they may chase that buck right to you. The point is you're not ruining their stock. You're not ruining their effort.
Let them ruin it themselves, right?
Yeah. Most likely, most hunters are going to ruin that stock. They're going to ruin it, and they're going to chase that deer out of there. You just got to know how to understand deer and know how to, find where they're funneling out of there and take advantage of it. You don't have to be a jerk and walk up in their shit. So anyway, yeah,
it's a super effective strategy. And then beyond that, just what's wrong with just being a kind person, right? Yeah, you'll make some friends
that way, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually made some friends just walking into the woods and talking to people and be like, hey, and of course, having a podcast. One guy was telling me how he, in the area we were hunting years ago, saw someone rolling around on a riding lawnmower. Like that's what he's riding instead of an ATV. And I was like, you, sir, you got to get on my podcast. And so he's connected with me. So we'll have that episode eventually. But like, I'm making friends, just talking to people in the woods. Like everyone out there is hopefully having a good time. Right. And
I mean, most of the people you meet on the mountain that are out there hunting, especially like, bow hunters, they kind of stick together, rifle hunters, they stick together. I'm an all around, I'll hunt with whatever, man. In fact, I've been chasing a cow with a muzzle loader lately. And so, all that kind of stuff, we're all on the same page. We're all on the same team. So if you took those individuals off the mountain and put them like in a bar down in town, you guys would be friends. You guys would be buddies. Yeah. Most likely you would be buddies. There's a lot of like-mindedness. So don't take that mindset of this guy that if you met him at the bar or at work or something, that you would be buddies, and all of a sudden up on the mountain because you think he's in your spot just because he beat you there.
Yeah.
Don't turn into an asshole about it.
Yeah.
Which is also why you have multiple plans.
If you find out what his plan is, then you have more information than he does, which means you can hunt that mountain a little bit more effectively. So, Jim, man, this was fun. I'm having a great time, man. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. We've been going for a while here, and I know you got plenty of more stories, but we'll just have to have you back on. So,
sweet, man. Yeah, let me know.
Yeah. Typically, at this point, what we do is you kind of tell the people where they can find you. I know that you got your podcast. If there's anything else you want to mention, your sponsors, whatever it might be, feel free.
The two biggest things I usually direct people to are the podcast, which you could find the Western Huntsman podcast anywhere podcasts are downloaded. And on Instagram, that's kind of where I keep everybody up to date, which is at the Western Huntsman. And you can also, we have a really lame website that I'm too cheap to upgrade, thewesternhuntsman.com. But yeah, everything is at the Western Huntsman. And you guys can feel free to check us out and listen to our show. And, when I say we, it's basically just me, but, I always,
do that same shit. It's just me, but I say we all the time.
but I do throw out. We are officially with Eastman's Hunting Journals. So the Western Huntsman is
Very
in
cool.
the Eastman's Hunting Journals family, and Eastman's has a lot of great things for Western hunters. Man, check out the Tag Hub and check out the Mule Deer course, all that kind of stuff. It's great folks over there, and so I'm really proud to be supporting them and having them support me.
That's awesome, Jim. Yeah, and I told you already, but the School of September, it's something unique that you do coming up to elk season. You bring the best of the
Yeah.
best of the elk hunters online, and man, every year I listen to every single episode. So if you guys
Oh,
want,
awesome! Thanks, man.
go. No, I'm not kidding. It's a staple of my like preseason prep. So don't cut that out, Jim.
Well,
And
no, stay tuned, man. We've got big plans for School of September for 2023. School of September is
that's
going to be a
awesome.
big deal. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's cool. All right, man. Well, hey, thank you. This has been fun, and
Yeah, thank you.
we're gonna have you back. And if you hear of anybody else who has some great stories, send them my way, Jim.
I'll keep you posted, brother.
All right.
I probably do. Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you again. I appreciate your time. All right, guys. That's it. Another couple of stories in the books. I want to thank Jim so much for jumping on the podcast. He couldn't have been more kind and inviting, and he really shared something with you guys. I'm not sure if he's shared that story with anyone else before. It is a little embarrassing, but it teaches you something. You know, if you're going to go jogging, put on your whitey tidies. So again, Jim, thank you so much. Both of your stories were wonderful. I can't wait to have you back on. You're a national treasure. Guys, follow him. I think it's the Western Huntsman podcast is his podcast. He's also on Instagram. I'm going to put links to all that stuff in the show notes. And then, of course, don't forget to follow us as well. It's Hunting Stories _official. And I'm going to ask you, please share the podcast. I want to get this thing growing. I'm getting a lot of views, or listens, and it's going really well. But there's more people out there that want to hear these stories. And the only way that we're going to share it is with you guys spreading the good word. So that being said, guys, thank you very much. I do appreciate you all tuning in. Now, go make some stories of your own.